The world is an orchestra that never stops tuning its instruments. For most people, the sound of a distant lawnmower, the flickering of a fluorescent bulb in an office hallway, or the subtle shift in a stranger's tone of voice is nothing more than background static, the white noise of a life being lived. But for some of you, there is no background. There is only the foreground. Everything is a lead instrument screaming for your attention at the exact same volume all at once. You sit in a crowded coffee shop in downtown Portland or a boardroom in Manhattan, and while everyone else is effortlessly sailing through the sea of social cues and sensory data, you are drowning in inches of water. You are manually calculating the distance between your eyes and theirs, deciding how many seconds of contact is considered normal before it becomes aggressive, and wondering why your heart is racing as if you've just narrowly avoided a car accident when all you did was order a latte. This is the quiet, invisible exhaustion of the undiagnosed. It is a specific kind of fatigue that sleep cannot touch because it isn't a lack of energy, it is a structural depletion. Statistically, we are told that autism is identified in childhood, spotted by teachers and pediatricians in the bright primary colors of a classroom. But statistics are often just stories about the people who were loud enough to be heard. Many of you were the quiet ones. You weren't the epidemic. You were the ghosts in the machine, the ones who learned to mimic the shape of the people around you so perfectly that no one ever thought to ask if you were okay. You spent decades building a persona, a mask so seamless that you eventually forgot where the mask ended and your own face began. And now at 30 or 40, you find yourself staring at a wall in a darkened room, feeling a profound sense of otherness that you've never had a name for. The core pain of the undiagnosed adult isn't necessarily the sensory sensitivity or the social awkwardness. It is the haunting suspicion that you are a failed version of a human being. It's the grief of looking at the people around you who seem to possess a secret manual for life that you never received. You watch them navigate relationships, careers, and small talk with a terrifying ease while you feel like you are perpetually translating a foreign language in real time, only to realize the dialect has changed by the time you finish your sentence. This leads to a persistent underlying emotional numbness, a state of anhedonia, where the world loses its color because you are simply too tired to look at it anymore. When every interaction requires the processing power of a supercomputer, your nervous system eventually makes the only logical choice it can: it shuts down. It pulls the shades, locks the doors, and retreats into a hollow gray space where nothing can hurt you, but nothing can reach you either. In our modern American landscape, we are obsessed with productivity and grit. We are told that if we are struggling, we just need to try harder, be more mindful, or get out of our comfort zone. But for the undiagnosed autistic adult, trying harder is exactly what is killing you. You have been trying harder than everyone else in the room since the day you were born. You have been running a marathon while everyone else is taking a stroll, and you are being criticized for breathing too heavily. This realization that your laziness is actually burnout and your awkwardness is actually a different neurological operating system is the first step toward reclaiming a self that has been buried under layers of performance. We aren't here to fix you. We are here to give language to a pain that has been nameless for far too long, and to understand why your brain chose the silence of the void over the noise of a world that refused to turn down its volume. Imagine a house built in the center of a vast open field. From the outside, it looks like any other home you'd see in a quiet suburb of the Pacific Northwest, sturdy, symmetrical, inviting. But inside, the architecture tells a different story. The hallways are slightly too narrow, the ceilings are just a bit too low, and the windows are made of a thick, distorted glass that makes the vibrant world outside look like a blurry, impressionistic painting. You live in this house. For years you've invited people over, watching them move through the rooms with ease, laughing at the way they don't seem to notice the hum of the refrigerator that sounds to you like a jet engine, or the way they don't stumble over the uneven floorboards that you've spent a lifetime memorizing. You've learned to walk the way they walk. You've learned to tilt your head when they speak, mirroring their expressions like a silent actor in a film with no sound. But every time the front door closes and the last guest leaves, you collapse against the wall. The silence of the house isn't just quiet, it's heavy. It's a physical weight that presses against your chest. You go to the kitchen to make a meal, but the sight of the cluttered counter feels like a personal attack. The thought of deciding what to eat, finding the ingredients, and managing the timing of the stove feels like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube while standing on a tightrope. So you don't eat. You sit in the dark watching the shadows stretch across the floor, feeling the hum of the house vibrate in your bones. This is the cinematic reality of the Spiky skill set. In one room of your house, you might have a library filled with books you've mastered, complex theories, intricate maps of fictional worlds, or the complete history of a niche subject that makes your heart beat with a rare electric joy. In that room, you are a king. You are brilliant. But to get to the bathroom or the kitchen, you have to navigate a labyrinth of simple tasks that feel like insurmountable mountains. You think of the tennis clubhouse mentioned in the old stories. You remember being the person who could master the physics of a table tennis ball with terrifying precision, playing with your left hand, just to feel a challenge while simultaneously dreading the moment someone asks you what you want for dinner. The simple act of scanning a QR code and navigating a digital menu feels like being asked to pilot a spacecraft. It's not that you can't do it, it's that the sheer number of steps required to bridge the gap between hunger and food creates a cognitive friction so intense it leaves you paralyzed. You are a person who can see the atoms but misses the forest. You are the one who notices the tiny rhythmic tap of a coworker's pen 3 cubicles away, a sound that eventually becomes all you can hear until your vision starts to blur. To everyone else, you are just difficult or particular. But in the private cinema of your mind, you are a survivor of a constant, invisible bombardment. You are the person who brings a power nap to a party because the lights and the laughter have drained your battery to 0 within 20 minutes. You aren't being rude. You are resetting your brain in the only way you know how, by retreating into the dark behind the distorted glass of your windows, where the world is finally mercifully forced to go quiet. To understand why this house feels so different, we have to look at the wiring beneath the floorboards. In the field of neuroscience, we often talk about the brain's ability to filter information. Imagine your brain as a high-end recording studio. In a neurotypical brain, there is a seasoned sound engineer sitting at the mixing board. This engineer knows when to slide the faders down on the background noise, the air conditioner, the distant traffic, the repetitive clicking of a colleague's keyboard, and when to boost the vocals of the person standing right in front of you. This process is largely handled by a region called the thalamus, often described as the gatekeeper of sensory information. In the autistic brain, however, that sound engineer is often missing, or perhaps they're overwhelmed by a board where every single fader is glued to the maximum setting. According to peer-reviewed research in sensory processing, this is known as sensory gating deficit. The gate is perpetually open. When you walk into a grocery store, your brain isn't just seeing groceries. It is registering the high-pitched hum of the industrial freezers, the clashing colors of 500 different cereal boxes, the scent of floor wax, and the tactile irritation of the tag on the back of your shirt. Because your thalamus isn't filtering this out, your amygdala, the brain's smoke detector, starts to perceive this sensory deluge as a physical threat. It triggers a cascade of cortisol and adrenaline, putting you in a state of chronic high alert for no apparent reason. This neurological reality also explains the spiky skill set we discussed earlier. Studies using functional MRI, fMRI, have shown that autistic brains often exhibit hyperconnectivity in local regions, meaning certain areas are incredibly dense with neural pathways, while showing hypoconnectivity between distant regions. Think of it as having a state-of-the-art high-speed fiber optic network within a single city, but only a dirt road connecting that city to the rest of the world. This is why you might possess a breathtaking ability to process complex patterns, mathematical sequences, or artistic details, local hyperconnectivity, yet struggle immensely with executive function, distant hypoconnectivity. Executive function is governed by the prefrontal cortex. It's the ability to plan, prioritize, and switch tasks. When those dirt roads get congested, simple multi-step tasks like cooking dinner or organizing a schedule become a cognitive nightmare. Furthermore, we must address the reward system. In most people, social interaction triggers a reliable release of dopamine. There is a biological carrot at the end of the social stick. However, emerging research suggests that for autistic individuals, the social reward circuitry operates differently. The hit of dopamine that others get from small talk or group validation might be absent or significantly diminished. Instead, your dopamine is often tied to your special interests, those deep, focused dives into specific topics. This isn't a lack of emotion, it's a difference in what your brain perceives as valuable. When you are forced to engage in social niceties that offer no neurological reward but cost a massive amount of sensory and cognitive energy, you aren't just being introverted. You are performing a high-stakes transaction where you are paying with gold and receiving back handfuls of sand. Eventually, the bank runs dry, leading to the shutdown that feels so much like a hollow, empty void. If neuroscience explains the how, psychology explores the who. For the undiagnosed adult, the most profound psychological burden isn't the autism itself, it's the chronic shame of not knowing you have it. In clinical terms, we look at the concept of social camouflaging, or masking. This isn't just basic politeness, it is a total suppression of one's natural instincts in order to survive. According to cognitive psychology, masking requires an immense amount of cognitive load. You are essentially running an everyday human simulation program on top of your actual personality 24 hours a day. Imagine you are a laptop. Most people are running a few basic apps, work, family, hobbies. But you, because of your undiagnosed state, are running a massive hidden background process that is constantly scanning for correct facial expressions, appropriate tones of voice, and acceptable ways to sit or stand. This background process consumes 80% of your battery. By the time you sit down to actually do your work or talk to your partner, you only have 20% left. When you inevitably run out of power, people don't see the 80% effort you put in. They only see the 20% failure. They see the shutdown. They see the laziness. And because you don't have a diagnosis to explain this, you start to believe they are right. You internalize the idea that you are fundamentally broken or less than. This leads us to the phenomenon of autistic burnout. Unlike typical occupational burnout, which is usually solved by a vacation or a career change, autistic burnout is a systemic collapse. It's what happens when the mask becomes too heavy to wear, but the world still demands you put it on. Psychologically, this often manifests as a terrifying loss of skills. You might find that you can no longer handle the grocery store you've visited for years, or that you suddenly can't find the words to explain your feelings to your spouse. This is the brain's way of saying, the vault is empty. We cannot keep pretending anymore. We also need to discuss emotional regulation and the binary experience of feelings. In the original video, Paul mentioned that autistic emotional regulation often looks like an on-off switch. There is very little middle ground. From a psychological perspective, this is often due to alexithymia, a condition where it is difficult to identify and name one's own emotions. You might not feel a little bit stressed. You might feel fine, fine, fine. And then suddenly you are in a full-scale meltdown or a catatonic shutdown. Because you can't feel the check engine light flickering in your chest, you drive the car until the engine literally explodes. This binary existence creates a deep sense of instability. You feel like a stranger to your own heart, never knowing when the next emotional storm will hit or why it's happening. This lack of a middle ground makes traditional self-help advice like, just lean into the discomfort, dangerous for you. Your discomfort isn't a growth opportunity, it's a neurological red zone. When you don't know you're autistic, you spend your life trying to push through thresholds that are actually brick walls. You punish yourself for not being able to tolerate what others cannot. Realizing that your experience of that thing, whether it's a loud party or a change in plans, is qualitatively different. You aren't failing at being a person. You are failing at being a person you were never meant to be. There is a specific kind of silence that exists only in the aftermath of a performance. At MindRabbit, we often look at anhedonia, that hollow gray numbness, as a symptom of a life that has been lived too loudly. For the undiagnosed autistic adult, anhedonia isn't just a lack of joy. It is a defensive crouch. It is the psychological equivalent of a circuit breaker tripping because the current was simply too high. When we look at the odd one-out feeling mentioned in the original video, we have to look deeper than just being quirky. We have to look at the existential loneliness of being a person who is constantly being translated but never truly read. You see, the world has a way of telling you that your intensity is a flaw and your silence is a problem. But from my perspective, after years of observing the quiet corners of human behavior, I've come to see that your differentness is often a form of radical honesty. While the rest of the world is busy performing social rituals that they don't even realize are rituals, you are standing there stripped of those instincts, forced to confront the raw reality of existence. Your unusual associations, the way you say space station, when someone else says banana, isn't a glitch. It's a window into a mind that isn't tethered to the boring, predictable tracks of common thought. You aren't just thinking outside the box. You don't even see the box. But that freedom comes at a cost. The cost is a profound sense of detachment. You walk through your life feeling like a ghost haunting your own biography. You see your friends, your family, your work, but you feel like there is a thin layer of plastic wrap between you and the experience of living. This is what I call the anhedonia of the mask. When you spend 90% of your energy pretending to be someone you aren't, the 10% of you that is real becomes too small to actually feel anything. You become a hollow shell, a highly functioning machine that can scan QR codes and make small talk about the weather but can no longer feel the sun on its skin. My insight for you today is this. Your shutdowns are not your enemy. They are the only part of you that is still telling the truth. When you shut down, your body is finally being honest about its limits. It is saying, I cannot do this anymore. In a world that demands constant growth and infinite resilience, the act of shutting down is a form of rebellion. It is the moment the ghost stops haunting and starts asking to be seen. The goal of understanding your autism isn't to find a way to stop shutting down. It's to build a life where you don't have to shut down just to survive the afternoon. It's about moving from a life of manual translation to a life of native expression, even if that expression is one that the rest of the world has to learn to read. When we expand our view of this condition, we realize that undiagnosed autism is not a fixed point, but a spectrum of friction. It's the way your mind interacts with a world that was built for a different kind of occupant. In the United States, we live in a culture of high-functioning anxiety, where we praise those who can push through exhaustion, but we have no category for those whose pushing through results in a total systemic collapse. We have been taught to value the content shell, the resume, the social media profile, the ability to network, while completely ignoring the emotional essence underneath. Consider the concept of context blindness. In psychology, this refers to the difficulty in automatically picking up the unspoken rules of a specific environment. For the autistic adult, every new room is a new set of physics. When you walk into a workplace in Portland or a family dinner in a quiet suburb, you aren't just there. You are trying to figure out the gravity of the room. Who has the power? What is the hidden meaning behind that joke? Why did the energy shift when that person walked in? For most, this is processed in the background. For you, it is a foreground task that eats up your bandwidth. This is why many of you gravitate toward unusual associations or esoteric hobbies. In those niche worlds, whether it's vintage synthesizers, 19th century history, or complex coding languages, the rules are fixed. The context is stable. There is a deep soul-level relief in finding a space where space station is a perfectly logical response to banana, because the internal logic of that world makes sense. We must also look at the modern empty life problem through this lens. Many of you have achieved everything society told you to the degree the job, perhaps even the marriage, and yet you feel a crushing sense of emptiness. This isn't just midlife ennui. This is the result of decades of identity confusion. When you have spent your entire life mimicking others to avoid being the odd one out, you eventually lose the ability to know what you actually want. You have become a reflection of everyone else's expectations. This is why the discovery of autism in adulthood is often accompanied by a strange, bittersweet grief. You are mourning the person you could have been if you hadn't spent all your time trying to be normal. You are realizing that your anhedonia wasn't a chemical imbalance in the traditional sense. It was the inevitable result of a life lived in a foreign language. This otherness isn't a defect. It's a different way of being a human. In the American narrative of the self-made man, we are told we can be anything we want to be. But the truth is, we are all born with a specific neurological architecture. Recognizing your architecture is not a limitation, it's an act of liberation. It allows you to stop trying to build a skyscraper on a foundation designed for a lighthouse. A lighthouse has a different purpose. It's meant to stand in the storm, to be solitary, and to cast a long, steady light for others who are lost at sea. When you stop trying to be the skyscraper, you can finally start being the light. The path toward recovery for the undiagnosed adult is not a journey of fixing, but a journey of unfolding. In the clinical world, we often focus on behavioral interventions, but at MindRabbit, we focus on the restoration of the self. Recovery begins with the radical act of self-validation. It starts when you look at your shutdowns, your quirks, and your clumsiness, not as symptoms of a broken mind, but as the scars of a mind that has fought a war no one else knew was happening. According to trauma-informed psychology, the first step in calming an overactive nervous system is to create a felt sense of safety. For you, that safety might not be found in a support group or a therapy session. It might be found in a pair of noise-canceling headphones, a dimly lit room, and the permission to stop smiling when you don't feel like it. We must address the anhedonia of the mask by slowly, carefully beginning the process of unmasking. This is not something you do all at once. That would be like stepping into the midday sun after years in a dark cave. You start small. You begin to notice the micro choices you make to please others at the expense of your own sensory comfort. You realize that you don't have to make eye contact with the barista if it makes your skin crawl. You realize that you can leave the party after 30 minutes without providing a complex excuse. As you stop spending 80% of your energy on the everyday human simulation, you will find that the hollow feeling begins to fill with something else. It might be a small, quiet interest. It might be a sudden, sharp appreciation for a specific texture or sound. This is your dopamine system finally coming back online because it is no longer being drained by the friction of performance. The gentle guidance I offer you is to treat yourself like a sensitive instrument. If you were a Stradivarius violin, you wouldn't blame yourself for sounding terrible in a rainstorm. You would blame the environment. Recovery involves environmental engineering. Instead of trying to change your brain to fit the world, you begin to change your world to fit your brain. This might mean setting boundaries at work, redesigning your living space to be sensory-friendly, or seeking out neuro-affirming relationships where your unusual associations are celebrated rather than corrected. In these spaces, the binary between functioning and shutting down starts to soften. You move from a state of survival to a state of being. There is a profound lesson in the way your body chooses to withdraw. In our culture, we are taught to fear the void. We see emotional numbness as a failure of the human spirit. But I want to suggest that your numbness is actually a form of sacred boundaries. When you shut down, your nervous system is performing an act of ultimate self-preservation. It is saying, "The world is asking for more than I can give, so I will give nothing until I am safe again." The lesson here is to stop pathologizing your need for withdrawal. Many of you spend your recovery time feeling guilty for doing nothing, not realizing that your nothing is actually the hard work of neurological repair. You are re-regulating. You are cooling down the processor. If you want to find your way back to joy, you must first find your way back to the silence. You must learn to sit in the gray space without the weight of shame. I want you to try an exercise this week. When you feel that familiar hollow feeling creeping in, when the world starts to look like a blurry film and your voice feels like it's coming from someone else, don't fight it. Don't try to push through it with caffeine or forced conversation. Instead, lean into it. Acknowledge it as a friend who has come to take the heavy lifting off your shoulders for a while. Say to yourself, "My system is protecting me right now. I am allowed to be quiet. I am allowed to be empty." Paradoxically, it is only when we stop fighting the emptiness that the emptiness begins to fade. As you grant yourself the right to be different, the friction that causes the burnout begins to dissipate. You aren't losing yourself in the void. You are clearing the clutter so that the real you can finally find a place to stand. You are moving from a life of doing to a life of witnessing. And in that shift, you will find a quiet, steady strength that the mainstream world will never understand. There is an old story about a star that fell from the sky and tried to live among the street lamps of a bustling city. The star spent all its energy trying to hum at the same frequency as the electricity, trying to flicker with the same artificial rhythm as the neon signs. It exhausted itself trying to be useful in the way the city understood lighting up a sidewalk or a storefront. But the star was always too bright or too dim. It never quite matched the harsh, steady glow of the tungsten. It felt like a failure. It felt like a broken lamp. It wasn't until the star wandered out past the city limits, away from the noise and the grit, that it realized it wasn't a lamp at all. It was a piece of the cosmos. In the deep velvet silence of the desert, it didn't have to try to shine. It simply existed, and in that existence it provided a map for travelers who were far more lost than the star had ever been. You are not a broken lamp. You are not a faulty version of the people you see in your office or on your television or in the grocery store aisle. You are a different kind of light. The 7 signs we've discussed today, the social exhaustion, the need for routine, the sensory flooding, the spiky talents, the shutdowns, these are not symptoms of a disease. They are the characteristics of a specific architecture. They are the way your soul has adapted to a world that for a long time didn't have a name for you. As we close this journey today, I want you to sit with the possibility that your otherness is actually your greatest anchor. The fact that you cannot easily join the hollow rituals of the modern world might be the very thing that keeps you real. The fact that you need the silence and the dark might be the very thing that keeps you sane. You have spent a lifetime trying to translate yourself into a language that wasn't built for your heart. Maybe it's time to stop translating. Maybe it's time to speak your own language, even if you are the only one who understands it for a while. The gray space, the anhedonia, the feeling of being a ghost. These are the shadows cast by the mask. As you begin to peel that mask away, piece by painful piece, you might find that the world feels a bit louder and a bit more frightening. But you will also find that you are finally, for the first time, actually there to experience it. You will find that you are no longer watching your life through a thick, distorted window. You are standing in the field. The air is cold, the grass is sharp, and the stars are very, very far away. But they are yours. I'm Evan Reed, and this has been MindRabbit. If you found yourself in these words today, don't feel pressured to do anything with them just yet. Just let them sit in the room with you. Let them be a blanket for the parts of you that have been cold for a very long time. You don't have to be better tomorrow. You just have to be you. And that, I promise, is more than enough.